Riding a 9-game winning streak, the Irish were ranked 5th when they arrived in Dallas for the 1978 Cotton Bowl against top-ranked Texas. For many of the Notre Dame players, this was their first bowl game, as well as a chance for a first national championship under Coach Dan Devine. Needless to say, this was the bowl game of New Year's Day.
The thing that sticks out in my mind in that game was initially early on in the game, you knew what kind of game it was going to be. Is every night before the games, they would freshly paint our helmets. And our helmets had been painted. And Ricky Churchman hit Jerome Heavens. And all I remember seeing in the sunlight was just this gold dust flying through the air and just sparkling everywhere. And the paint had just shattered. I mean, just come into tiny pieces all over the place. And you're going, it's going to be a long day. But
Texas was the favorite at kickoff. The Longhorns had both the Heisman Trophy winner in Earl Campbell and the Outland Award winner in Brad Shearer on the field. Yet, with one of the nation's top offensive units, Texas had trouble moving the football against the Irish, due in part to the play of linebacker Bob Golick.
Our defense played great. Bob Golick, probably played one of his greatest games ever as a middle linebacker. It was like two bulls meeting in the field at full speed, and Bob ended up winning the battle in the long run.
I think the most special thing about that game was that Texas was the only undefeated team in the country at that time.
With the Irish defense having met the challenge of the Longhorns, the offense now turned to Joe Montana to lead them to a national championship. Montana replied with a balanced attack. Jerome Heavens and Vegas Ferguson each ran for over 100 yards, and Terry Urick scored a pair of touchdowns.
It was a great feeling, I think, because it was one of those years that we had a great defense and we had a good offense. The majority of guys who go through college and even on great football schools don't have an opportunity to win a championship. And so it's something that you can always look back on and be proud of as a member of that team.
With his senior year still remaining, Joe saved some of his best for last. With the team off to a slow 2-2 start, Montana turned a 17-7 deficit against Pittsburgh into comeback victory number 5, passing for 218 yards and 2 touchdowns, most of it taking place in the game's final 13 minutes. The Los Angeles Coliseum was the site of Joe's last regular season game as a member of the Fighting Irish, as Notre Dame and USC renewed their famous rivalry. With just under 13 minutes remaining, the Irish began the rally from a 24-6 deficit with a passing attack led by Joe Montana. Again and again in the fourth quarter, Joe went to his favorite receiver, Chris Haynes, as he piled up career highs in passing yardage, passes attempted, and completed. Montana rang up 358 yards and 2 touchdowns, and had the Irish up 25-24 before USC ultimately prevailed with a last-minute field goal.
I think the wind chill was down to like 30 below, I mean, it was just something just really atrocious to play football in. And the field had been covered with like 2 inches of ice. We were warming up and this golf cart's going back and forth all around the field. And we're going, what the heck's this guy doing? He's throwing rock salt on the pieces of ice that were left. I mean, I was one scab on both my arms, probably from my elbow halfway up my wrist, on both elbows, and on my knees. They had to cut my pants and my jersey off. You know, everybody wanted to win it, but everybody was looking at the clock, stay in bounds, you know? Oh, don't go out of bounds. What is that guy doing?
For most of the first half against Houston, it looked as though Joe Montana's final game as a member of the Fighting Irish might just slip away without the familiar Montana magic. Notre Dame squandered a 12-point lead, and the Irish simply couldn't hold on to the ball for most of the game. Trailing 34-12 midway through the final quarter, the Irish began their comeback. Playing with hypothermia, Joe spent the second half shuttling between the field and the locker room, where the medical staff fed him chicken bouillon between possessions. Thus, this game became known to many as the Chicken Soup Bowl. And now, with the wind at their backs, the Irish put their first points on the board since the first quarter. Montana and Haynes teamed for a final drive that took Notre Dame to the Houston 8-yard line and set up one of the most unique endings to a college career.
It's kind of a unique kind of thing that happened, too, is we ended up throwing this pass, and I missed it the first time, so I wanted to run it again, and I ended up signaling back, and he said, okay, run it. And so we ran again, and we throw the ball down low and away in hopes that we might have another play, but Chris Haynes makes a great catch in the corner of the end zone for the touchdown.
Although the national championship didn't hang in the balance as it had at the previous year's Cotton Bowl, this New Year's Day victory, or comeback number 7 as many Notre Dame alumni refer to it, almost seemed to count for more. What it did was to close out the college career of Joe Montana, one that saw him finish as Notre Dame's 3rd leading passer behind Joe Theismann and childhood idol Terry Hanratty. And although he finished among impressive company, it hit home that his football career was once again in someone else's hands.
That's when I sat there and thought about it, that it was over, and then you start wondering about your career. I had graduated in December, so I was finished completely. And you start wondering what you're going to do, where you're going to go, and looking forward to the Hula Bowl, and then on to Japan. And start worrying about your career at that point.